Good afternoon and welcome. This is your Mountain State Update, your Sunday political sermon right here on WTSQ 88.1 LP. It's July 30th. So the last show of July 2017. Let's see. You can always catch up with us on Twitter at Mountain State Up. Got to mention that. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on previous episodes. I'm John Canties, and today I'm joined by the man, the myth, the public news correspondent, Daniel Hyman.
Got plenty of Java and Chesterfield Kings.
You ever go by Daniel?
Either one.
I've never called you Daniel.
Call me anything you want. Just don't call me late for dinner.
All right. That was is that an airplane or something? Is that an airplane reference?
No. I think I think that may actually be.
Don't call me Shirley.
Hee-haw. Yeah, don't call me Shirley.
Okay.
Maybe a hee-haw joke. Don't call me late for dinner.
All right. We got a lot of stuff going on.
I answer to anything except for "Hey, stupid."
All right, that's fair. You shouldn't answer to that. That's mean. We have a lot of stuff going on. We're going to be talking about John McCain's deciding vote in the healthcare repeal bill, I should say.
Right.
Priebus is out as chief of staff, which has more implications than I think people realize. North Korea's latest provocations and the situation with the Boy Scouts of America doing their best to kind of walk that line,
right,
of not taking sides but still not being silent. Very hard to do both of those things.
Yeah. Well, there's an important issue, an important point about the culture war in that Boy Scout speech,
sure.
and we can get to that.
Yeah, we'll get it. That's kind of a fluffy little story. We'll get to that.
Well,
at the
but
end.
that's interesting. I think that it's important to talk about that.
Oh, I just mean like compared to North Korea. It's fluffy.
It's more pressing. North Korea is more pressing.
Right. So let's see. Let's go ahead and jump into this here because this was a big moment, and I think there's more to it than people realize. By the way, before we get into it, great talk on The Brew. I don't know if everyone who listens to this show listens to that show. I believe most people who listen to the show do,
right?
Because feeds right into us. They're both talk shows, but that was a great discussion. They went into the highlight of it was Aaron asking, at what point can we not cut anymore?
Right.
And that's the question.
Well, Oliver Wendell Holmes, I may have used this quote on this show before, but Oliver Wendell Holmes famously said that taxes are the price you pay for living in a civilized society. And if a modern complex nation, a modern complex industrial nation is going to have an absolute minimum of its GDP go to government services, because there are just things that governments do that the markets can't. And there's a long philosophical argument about that, but you're going to find that, for example, the percentage of the GDP, I don't remember what it is in the U.S. I think it's in the mid-20s. Maybe
sure.
I may be wrong. It may be higher than that, but it's actually fairly low in the United States compared to other industrialized nations. Sure. And you're just not going to get too much below that.
Sure. And I just wanted to give them a little shout out for that, because that was a great show. They're always a great show.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. But
that's an interesting discussion. I mean, it's an important point.
Right. And it doesn't need to just be in the political realm with people like me and you and Ted, or it doesn't need to just be in that. Like, everyone should be having that conversation. Well,
I think one of the this is something I'm going to be writing about today for tomorrow at the on my day job as a public news service reporter for the West Virginia News Service. And you can find my pieces at publicnewsservice.org. And you can find this when I have it up, which should be late tonight, early tomorrow. That people really tuned into this. This is why the healthcare debate was so important, is because people really tuned into the issue of whether or not this should be something that the government helps make happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an enormous amount of philosophical but also practical importance that people could see in this. And they began to see that some of these issues were not just wonky political discussions for
not
folks
just
like us.
Right. It actually affects your life. Okay.
It actually affects real people's real lives. And the more they found out about that, the more agitated they got.
So speaking of things that affect everyone's lives, the Affordable Care Act repeal They tried to get this thing through since day one. Trump said they were going to do it on day one, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. He said it's going to be on his desk on day one.
I'm not sure what day it is exactly, but it's not
6 months.
Yeah.
Approximately.
It's not one. It's further than one. And so what happened here was, with the tilt of his thumb, Senator John McCain got the last laugh with a simple yet dramatic thumbs down on the Senate floor in the wee hours of Friday morning. Who wrote this? What signaled to the Senate, his colleagues, and the rest of the... No, not this part. His colleagues, I think this is from Public Broadcasting's website.
Right.
The rest of the United States... okay, hold on. He signaled to the Senate, his colleagues, and the rest of the United States that he was not prepared to go along with the latest Republican plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. After the vote, the 80-year-old senator, who earlier this month was diagnosed with brain cancer, was seen laughing with Senator Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, the two other Republicans who voted against the health care bill. Before we get into it, notice who's not on the list of people who voted against this health care bill. Shelley Moore Capito. She voted for it. She voted to repeal after all that.
Well,
and I said on the last show...
She voted against one of the repeals, but she voted for two of the repeals.
She voted for this, which is worse.
There were basically 4 important votes in a row in the Senate over this. One was the vote to proceed, which is to start the debate.
Right.
She voted in favor of that.
Right.
There were 3 different versions, and she voted against one of those that was sort of the most draconian.
All of them terrible. This one probably the worst, I guess.
Well, I think it was the middle one was the one that was the worst.
In a vacuum, it's the worst.
Yeah, maybe. I'd have to go back and check. I think the middle one was repeal.
This was just straight repeal.
Repeal and delay.
Well, the idea, I guess, was you vote.
Right, straight repeal.
You do this, you do the straight repeal.
She voted for the straight repeal.
Right. And then
voted against the straight repeal, but she voted in favor of the complicated Senate bill, and she also voted in favor of the so-called skinny repeal, which is
what just happened on Friday.
And why? I mean, we can talk about why McCain and Murkowski, why we think that they voted against this in a minute. But yeah, I mean, a friend of mine put up on Facebook. She said, wow, it looks like Shelley Moore Capito really did go to Washington to hurt people. I mean, I am very disappointed. There were 4 important votes in a row, and I
think that was me.
She voted, she voted really against the interests of her constituents, as I see it.
Yeah.
Against the interest of her constituents 3 out of 4 times.
And this is what we talked about on the show last week. You know, she said, "I didn't come to Washington to hurt people. Don't worry about me. It's a no vote. I'm not gonna throw people off Medicaid." And I told you all, hey, I told you guys, keep an eye on this person. She will do us dirty.
Right.
And what happened?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Senator Capito for you. I'm not surprised.
Well, I don't know. I didn't catch the discussion on the brew, but I do think
they're talking about West Virginia stuff.
Well, I mean, but this is, I mean, they're right, you're right. This is something that hits home, right? This is an issue that does hit home, has hit home, and should hit home. This is one of these points where politics and policy matter, right? This is one of these points where people out in the boonies, out in small town West Virginia, looked up and looked around and said, hey, this impacts my life. This impacts the lives of people I know. This impacts the lives of people like Erin Brewster, who just came back in because she forgot her purse.
Charger.
Yeah. Her charger. Okay.
Yeah. Gotta
have that. And so it's an apt point to make that this is something this is one of these points where politics becomes broader than simply, a boring discussion inside the Beltway, which a lot of times people want to make you think it's boring and it's a foregone conclusion and it really doesn't matter and you can't do anything anyway. They want to make you cynical.
Oh yeah,
because
then you're not involved.
Then they can get away with what they want. But this was a case where, and this is what I'm going to be reporting on, people really got involved and people really got agitated, and we saw the impact on the votes.
That's the big lesson from all this, I think. You hit the nail right on the head. Democrats don't control anything.
Right.
Yet the Republicans aren't able to do this. And that's because people are paying attention. Democrats went to sleep, okay, under Obama.
Right.
Like in large, not completely, but by and large, Democrats, Obama's president, nothing bad can happen.
Yeah.
You know, people are awake now and paying attention. And even it could be a
got
lot
woke.
People done got woke. And it could be a lot better.
Yeah.
But we're at a point now where people who are completely out of power.
Right.
We do not have anything. There's no way to vote against more war. There's no way to vote against Goldman Sachs. I mean, there's no way to do that right now.
Well, there is a way.
But because we are all paying attention and we're calling these senators and we're emailing them.
Right. We're showing up in the street.
Putting pressure on them.
Yeah, exactly.
But now it's kind of scary that that's the only tool we have, but we're using it and it clearly can work.
Well, I believe in that. I think I don't just believe in that as a functional issue in this one case and as a pragmatic issue. As I said last week on this show, this is what democracy looks like.
Yeah.
You know, this is the way that democracy is supposed to work. You're supposed to call your Congress people, call up your Congress critters, send them emails or whatever, and tell them what you think, and that's supposed to impact their opinion.
Right. We should be doing this all the time.
Yeah, we should be doing
not just
this
when our healthcare zone.
And one of the things that's interesting, and it's going to bear watching for the next election. A lot of the sort of activist types, the usual suspects who I know, friends of mine, a lot of them, are saying that the people they're seeing come out for this healthcare stuff, people organizing events, people volunteering, people showing up at demonstrations, people making phone calls, these are new people to them. These are not the usual, as I was saying, the usual suspects. This is fresh blood. So that's important. That's also important. The fact that we're bringing new people into the discussion, and they're making their voices heard and their diversity of opinion. And we're seeing a lot of energy behind, for example, Medicare for all, right, or Medicaid for all. Mm-hmm. We're starting to see that show up, and I think that's really interesting. The other part of this that I think is important is how badly the Republicans handled the process has really come back to hurt them. And this may have more to do directly with John McCain's vote against this final skinny repeal. Basically, what I think happened is that the Republicans, after, as everybody has been saying for 7 years, they've been saying they want to repeal it. They've been passing repeal after repeal after repeal. Well, me and a lot of other wonky policy types have been looking at this and saying they're not proposing an alternative. They're not proposing a workable substitute for the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare.
Not just that, but they have had 7 years to come up with one and have not.
And have not. Well,
which tells you a lot.
I think that right now, in general, in the last few years, few decades, maybe decade, maybe a couple of decades, the GOP has been thin on policy ideas and long on smart media strategy. Mm-hmm. But the Democrats have been the reverse, that we've been the ones who will go into the text in the legal code and figure out what needs to be changed, how you do something like make an insurance market work, and Obamacare is a big, complicated machine with a lot of moving parts, and not everybody was sure that it was going to work, and there are some parts that need to be improved. But it was working because we had been working on this policy really at least since the Clinton era. That something like the Obamacare.
Well, yeah, Bob Dole
is better than 20 years old.
Gingrich. It's really a right wing. It's really a right wing healthcare plan.
Well, it is. But the idea is that this is something this was a policy that was developed as just purely in a pragmatic sense. What will get more people into healthcare at a reasonable cost in a way that we can get through Congress. That was all we were looking for. But
and it does that.
But because we paid attention, and I say we because I covered this, when it was happening, and I watched it, and I, was watching the debates about how do we do this in a way that'll work. So, for example, we were talking about, at the time we were talking about, the steps that the United States has made to cover people. You start out with Social Security is a pension fund, but then that's, expanded to include people with disabilities, which is what you say you want to cover people with disabilities. And then you have something for the elderly, which was Medicare. So everybody over 65 is covered. And then you cover everybody under 18 with S-CHIP, thanks to Jay Rockefeller and people like him, the Children Insurance Program. And then you're covering the very, very most destitute poor under Medicaid, which was typically a third of the poverty rate in a lot of states when it first came in. So people like me or, policy people who were drawing this stuff up, I mean, I can't claim that I was drawing it up, but I was covering these debates.
You were in the nitty-gritty.
We're looking at it and saying who remains to be covered and how do we get them in? And it said, okay, there's two populations we want to get. There's the working poor and there's people who can't afford individual insurance because the individual insurance market is all blown to snot, right? And so the working poor we covered with the Medicaid expansion, and the people who were trying to get individual insurance didn't have employer insurance. They went into the exchanges and blah, blah, blah. So there's all these complicated pieces, but they were all designed to do specific things, and how they worked together were thought out. This is what the Republicans never did.
Right.
Over 7 years. And then they had this surprise election. They come in and they don't have a policy. They have a position that they, something they want to put forward, but they can't get from A to B, and they haven't figured it out. And
so it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it in 2018, because
it will be,
because they're going to try to play the same hits from the Obama administration,
right?
Where they're complaining about how Obama did all this, Obama did all that, but they will have been in power for a year and a half,
right?
And they're not going to.
Well, in 18 it'll be 2 full years, so yeah.
Well, yeah, but so that song isn't going to sound as good,
yeah.
Well, so we're going to see how they handle that. It's going to be interesting to watch them.
The point that John McCain made on the floor of the Senate is, this is not how you make law. He said that they never went back. They never went through the committee process. They never went through the hearing process. They never went through what's known as markup, which is where you take a piece of proposed legislation and you go through it and you say, well, what'll this do and what'll that do? And we need to change this and we need to change that. They never... Thomas Jefferson's phrase is the anvil of democracy. The legislative process should be the anvil of democracy, where you pound things out, right? They never took those steps because they were politically afraid.
They barely got the CBO scores out in time when they were putting legislation up.
Well, and Mitch McConnell was trying to he was doing his best, and it was pretty clever. I was impressed by how far he got, frankly.
Yeah.
But he was trying to sell, as they say, a half a duck, a duck in a bag, a pig in a poke, because they tried to draw this stuff up in behind secret.
Yeah, he would keep it. I mean, that was the key, right? Was to get it passed with as little time for public scrutiny as possible.
Right.
That was the mission.
Right.
And
the more scrutiny they got, the more, we were saying before,
the more it's looked at, the less people want it.
The more ordinary people got involved, the more unpopular it got, the more outraged people got. And this is what John McCain was saying, and this is what people like Joe Manchin have been saying, is open up the process, hold hearings, talk to the Democrats, get a piece of legislation that'll get 60 votes. So what we had rather than the normal process was we had this very secretive, rushed process in the House where they just slapped something together and they managed to ram it through by sheer force of majority.
Right.
And they basically did it. Yeah, basically did it on the understanding that the Senate would fix it. So they didn't really have a smart policy put together. They were expecting the Senate to have the smart policy.
And the Senate wanted to pass skinny repail so the House would fix it.
Yeah, and this is what John McCain, McCain said when he voted in favor of going ahead with the debate was he said, okay, we're going to have this debate as the first opportunity to really open this up to public scrutiny, to the anvil of democracy. We're going to have amendments. We're going to have, discussions of policy finally. But we should have been doing this all along. And I think that is probably why he voted against this, is because he didn't see it as being a smart way to make policy. And he was absolutely right. If they had passed this and it went to a conference committee, we still wouldn't know what their actual policy for replacing the Affordable Care Act would be.
Right. And another aspect of it was Trump wasn't involved.
Right.
If I remember,
who knew healthcare could be so complicated?
Right. Who knew, man?
I did. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think most people did. But the thing was, I remember when the Affordable Care Act was being sold to everybody.
Right.
Obama was out there.
Right.
Holding rallies. There were hearings.
Right.
He was selling it. He wasn't. I mean, he just he barely got over the finish line. But he was out there convincing people face to face,
right,
talking to them and rallies everywhere. I mean, he was out there trying to sell it, and that's what you do when you're, especially if you're popular. You want to attach it to you. Trump's not popular, so maybe that's why he wasn't doing it. But
well, also just this. We can talk about this in the context of Priebus and the Mooch.
Oh God, the Mooch.
The Mooch.
I hate him.
But the Trump administration is just not very effective at governing.
Well, it seems like, I think
he says with a deep sigh.
Well, here's the thing. He's a terrible boss. And he sets this tone.
The amazing thing is that was what he was supposed to be.
Right, he was supposed to be the boss guy.
Deal maker.
I'm a terrible guy, but I'm a good boss.
Yeah,
that was his sales pitch.
Yeah,
and now we're seeing you're not.
Salesman and a deal maker and a I can do this. Right. I can do it cheaper and better
he's
than everybody else. I'm smarter than everybody else. I'm smarter than the generals. I'm smarter than the politicians.
Right. And even
he's not.
The whole argument was vote for me.
Competent.
Vote for me despite my flaws, because I'll get in there and I'll get stuff done. Well, now we have someone who has the flaws, those personal flaws. He's a terrible person, and he isn't getting stuff done. So all the way around.
No, and I mean, the criticism of Obama was that he's aloof. The criticism of Bill Clinton was that he was too wonky. He was too involved in the policy debates. He was too spend.
Remember when that was a criticism?
Right. He was too involved.
Yeah.
Right. He was too detail oriented.
I can't even fathom that anymore.
Yeah, and here we have Trump, who I don't think he even really understands some of these important questions. No, how do you make an insurance market work? What does it take to bend the cost curve for healthcare costs? How do we do this?
Right. He doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
Let's talk about McCain for a second here, because he was the vote on this that, and he made a moment out of it.
Right.
You watch the video. It's an easy video to find. Go out there and Google it. Of him walking up there.
Do you think he did that intentionally?
Well, yeah, I think so. Maybe a little bit of domestic posturing, because now he has something he can spin back to his constituents,
right,
in his next election.
Well, but I don't think he needs that.
Here's the other element to it,
I don't think he was ever going to get defeated in Arizona.
Maybe not, but it doesn't hurt to have another nice thing to spin.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I mean, his opponent, the person who said he should, resign after his medical issues, is just a frickin' whack job.
Right.
But that's another, chemtrails conspiracy theorist whack job.
Yeah, that guy's it's
a female woman. Yeah.
Oh, is it a female?
But, yeah,
okay.
she's a Tea Party female.
Okay,
person.
good.
But anyway, yeah, right.
But so here's the thing that I'm thinking of. I think of the comment that Trump made about soldiers not getting caught. He likes soldiers that don't get caught. And McCain didn't really say anything about it.
Right.
But now here he is making a moment, purposefully going down there, being the last vote.
It's possible.
And giving it a big old thumbs down like he's in a Greek amphitheater or something.
It's possible.
And it looks to me like maybe that's a little cold revenge dish.
It may be. I mean, it might be. I mean, and that's definitely, I mean, that was also the rap on Obama, that he didn't schmooze the members of Congress. He didn't schmooze the Congress critters.
That was my criticism of him. I think he should have done that.
Yeah.
But anyway, what do you think about McCain? Like,
it's possible.
How much of that do you think was going on there? Because to me, while I'm thinking of that and watching him, it makes a lot of sense.
There are people who took that video, like there's a 10 or 15 second, maybe 30-second video, and you can find it online. There are people who broke that down the way that they would break down a Renaissance painting.
Yeah.
Say, here's this person.
It was kind of a Renaissance painting.
It's a real set
Elizabeth
piece.
Warren was in the back clapping, and Chuck Schumer was like telling the Democrats, no,
don't
relax.
cheer.
Yeah, like there was a lot going on.
And there's, Mitch McConnell with his arms crossed right there, and
Mike Pence was running around trying to whip votes.
Whip votes, and McCain is like facing Mitch McConnell right there, right in his face.
Yeah.
Right directly in front of him. Is like not denying it at all, not hiding it. He's thumbs down. It's an interesting picture. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I think that McCain may be, I'd like to think that John McCain is past that. I'm not sure that
I don't think
he
he's that petty. I don't think he's that petty that would completely drive it.
Well, he was kind of petty after he got beat by Obama. He was sort of petty to the president, when Obama was president.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Everybody is, though, I guess. When you lose a presidential election, everybody's like, well, I hate everyone for like a year.
As Napoleon Bonaparte said, every soldier in my army carries a colonel's baton in their bag. In other words, every member of the Senate thinks that they could be president. When you reach that point, you're sort of like, I could do that.
Every senator looks in the mirror and sees a president.
Actually, frankly, compared to Trump, I would take John McCain in a freaking heartbeat.
Oh yeah. Well, sure, yeah.
But I don't know. We don't know. It may have been the fact. I mean, the governor of Arizona was very negative on this. McCain was negative on the process. It may have been his pride was injured. It may be a combination of factors. We may never know.
And he did vote to proceed.
He did vote
with
to
Capito
proceed.
and
Yeah, but he was that speech he gave before the vote to proceed was a very interesting speech.
I should have pulled audio of that for the show because that was a good speech.
It was a good speech.
If you really want to hear,
interesting speech.
If you really want to hear, kind of a good series of thoughts that sort of sum up this whole situation, go Google McCain's speech that he gave when he voted to proceed with the bill,
right?
With the repeal, the skinny repeal. That was that like kind of summed it all up.
Yeah,
he did. That was a really good job.
I mean, who knows? John McCain, I don't always agree with him, but I do think he will. I think he has at least he will vote the way that he actually thinks. He won't try to find a reason to. Like, I think Shelley might be guilty of finding a reason to toe the Republican line. She can justify that to herself or to her staff or maybe to her voters. Right. Although I'd like to see,
it's gotten her this far.
Face that.
It's gotten her so far. So,
but McCain, if he really thinks that this is a bad idea, he'll tell you.
Yeah. He's a maverick, you could say.
Well, sometimes he's a maverick, but in this case, I think he is. And it's a very interesting. I mean, the notion of do not piss off a senator because they will have the ultimate word. There were these moments where Trump and the Trump administration, was trying to use the Interior Department to pressure Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and that pretty much blew up in Trump's face because you ain't gonna push Lisa Murkowski around. I mean, this is a woman who won as a write-in candidate, and Murkowski is not exactly an easy name to write in. Okay.
Now, did she say go back to committee? Did she just recently say that?
I think so. I think
so.
She and Collins have both made that procedural.
So that kind of leads me to my next question to you. Obviously, this particular repeal is dead,
right?
But we know The Republicans still want this, and we know that the Republican donors still want this. So
the smart thing to do.
Do you think this is dead until 2018 and then they'll try again?
The smart thing to do, and I've never accused the Republicans of being smart. I mean, Mitch McConnell is smart, and he may do this, although he's been absolutely adamantly refusing to do it because I think he feels like the hardcore Republican base would revolt if he did it. But the smart thing to do would be to call the Joe Manchins and the Claire McCaskills and the who's the woman from Washington or Oregon who was involved in this, and then the Murkowskis, and then get the hardcore the Chuck Grassley's who's done a lot on healthcare. Chuck probably, I don't know, he seems to be busy doing other stuff, but there are a lot of people who are, the Lamar Alexanders. Get them to write a frickin' bipartisan bill. Get something that gets 60 votes and then see if you can get it through the House. This is what they should do.
That's what they needed to do from day one. And then they could have come out of this being big-time winners, I think.
I think it would be politically smart.
That's not what their donors want, though. Their donors want the whole thing repealed.
The question is, are they trying to appeal to the base, or are they trying to appeal to the broad spectrum of American politics? And that's up to Mitch McConnell.
Sure.
And knowing Mitch McConnell, I think he probably realizes this, but I think he thinks that it's more dangerous to piss off his base. So they may take I do think that they might take another stab at trying to do this with just Republicans, or almost all just Republicans.
Sure. All right, what we're going to do real quick is we're going to take just a little break, just for a couple minutes, and then we'll come right back and we'll talk about Reince Priebus and John Kelly.
Briefly.
And all these good people in North Korea and the Boy Scouts. We got some stuff we're going to try to cram into the second half of the show here.
Right.
Because we spent the whole half on healthcare, which you kind of have to do because it's a complicated topic.
Let's rip through some of these topics. I want to talk about Boy Scouts.
Sounds good. Okay, so we'll be right back. You're listening to WTSQ 88.1. This is the Mountain State Update. I'm John Canties. We'll be right back here in just a couple minutes. Okay, we're back. This is the Mountain State Update. I'm John Canties. I'm here with Dan Hyman. You're listening to WTSQ 88.1 LP FM.
Charleston, West Virginia. You
Right here in
can tweet us at Mountain State Up.
There you go.
Or you can tweet me at PNS_WV.
Right.
Stay in touch with us that way.
Sure. Also, I say it at the top of the show, but our episodes and some other stuff that I feel like throwing up are up all on our YouTube channel. We have a Mountain State Update YouTube account that I've been throwing some stuff on.
And you can listen to this show and any WTSQ program streaming via the web at WTSQ.org.
Which I feel like a lot of people are doing.
I think so.
That's how I prefer to listen to it, honestly. Because then I can just pull my phone around with me and listen to it. Don't have to be near a radio, but whatever.
Let's bloviate.
Bloviation time. Okay, so Reince Priebus is out as chief of staff. John Kelly's in. This was kind of the cap for a long week of weirdness with Reince Priebus and this guy named the Mooch.
Anthony Scaramucci.
Who called Trump a hack like less than a year ago, but now he's in the administration. So he and Priebus, I've seen pictures of them together. Mm-hmm. These men do not like each other. I don't know what happened, but they don't seem to be able to offer each other any expression other than a scowl. I don't know what the problem is there. Something happened.
I'm not sure what's going on. I mean, we can do some criminology, try to interpret the tea leaves.
Well, the thing is, okay,
what's going on inside
to break it down
White
quickly
House.
is that there's obviously, we all know there's been a lot of leaks coming out of the White House, probably some senior level leaks, and I think Scaramucci thinks that it's Priebus because
he said that.
He accused him of it. He walked it back a little bit afterwards. He does the same thing Trump does, where he has an outburst on Twitter and then he walks it back, or somebody tries to walk it back
Let
for him.
alone an outburst to a reporter from the Atlantic.
Right,
well, I see all of this, and like I said, we can try and interpret the interpersonal interactions of the Trump White House in a lot of different ways, figure out what's going on there. But I think that a lot of this can just be said to be just continued dysfunction in the White House.
That's ultimately what it adds up to. Because if you look at the whole, this is kind of an interesting story in a vacuum, but really it's part of a bigger story, which is that he can't hold on to people. This administration has seen more resignation. I don't think Obama had anywhere near this. I think maybe one person who resigned from Obama.
The sense I had was that Priebus was picked to ameliorate the conventional Republicans. He's kind of a swamp creature, but he was the former head of the RNC, and so he was seen as a bridge to the traditional Republicans.
Yeah, that's the thing that was interesting about it, because he was a lifeline that the establishment had with Trump and his ilk.
Right.
He was the guy who would be like, I see where you're coming from, but here's what reality is.
Right.
And now that element is not there.
And that's a normal function for a chief of staff.
Right. And I think John Kelly may be establishment enough to continue that. I'm not sure. He's been around.
One of the things that's interesting about Trump to me is the amount of deference he gives to these military guys. Kelly is, of course, an ex-Marine general, I think. Anyway, he was former National, Department of Homeland Security. He's ex-military. He's obviously a tough guy. Trump clearly
still seems like an odd choice for chief of staff, though. Chief of staff, I imagine more of a civilian perspective would be better, but I guess we're going to find out.
Well, what you want, for example, Obama had a lot of people didn't like him, but I think he was very effective. Was Rahm Emanuel, who's basically a head knocker.
Right.
He's a tough guy, an inside politics guy who could bust heads together. And
which is what you need as a chief of staff.
Yeah,
you kind of need like a miniature president.
You sort of have to, you have to control who gets access to the president, what ideas get to the president, how they get implemented. You need somebody who can turn the president's thoughts or random tweets, as it were, into action, which is, of course, the problem that Kelly or anybody else is going to have. But I think the body language I'm seeing in the press from the White House about the Kelly selection suggests that they want a general because they want somebody who can make the troops get in line.
I guess
I'm not sure that's, but again,
so it doesn't seem like the job of the chief of staff.
Well, in a way, it is. I mean, I guess it's as much the chief of staff's job as it is anyone's. But it's still going to be very hard to turn Donald Trump's random tweets, like when he says, I consulted with my generals and the military experts, and I said, there's going to be no transgender people in the military because of the expense, blah, blah, blah. He obviously had not vetted that. No one at the Pentagon knew he was going to say that. So how do you turn that into reality, into policy reality? It is a very difficult, if not impossible, job. And that is, again, speaks to the White House dysfunction, just level of disorganization and dysfunction.
Let me ask you this. When Priebus took over as chief of staff and he left being chairman of the RNC, who took over chairman of the RNC? Did anybody? I don't think I saw what happened there.
That's an interesting point. There's got to be somebody's the chair of the RNC. I don't know who it is.
Kind of a side issue.
Maybe
that's under wraps for a reason. I don't know.
Well,
it can't be under wraps. People know,
the real heads of the Republican Party now are Ryan and McConnell.
Right.
And they're smart, and they're, we talked about the politics of some of the issues in Congress, and we'll see when they start talking about the debt limit. We'll see. So it's interesting that Priebus is out. I'm interested to see what he does next, because he is an attack dog. I've seen him give speeches. I've seen him deal with people. I've interviewed him.
He's a force to be reckoned with.
I've interviewed him, and he struck me as a sort of a classic swamp creature. He was very good at misdirection. He didn't want to answer one of the questions I was asking him, and so he answered the question he wanted to answer. And even though I came back at him 3 or 4 times, he still, sort of eluded eluded my point and, basically found a way to run the interview out without answering the question. So he's a swamp creature. He's an experienced political hand, and he'll show back up somehow.
I'm sure. Okay, let's shift gears here. Let's talk about the Boy Scout story.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, the Boy Scouts invited the president, as they always do. I think they've done this since the existence of the Jamboree in the 40s.
It's been common. I don't know whether every president has done it, but
not every president's done it, but they always invite the president.
Right.
As I understand it, that's what happens.
Right.
So Trump actually took the opportunity to do it, and he basically just talked politics for maybe the first half.
He just did the usual Trump thing,
right? And so that's not really. I mean, I guess that's the story in a way, but I think the story to me is how well the Boy Scouts handled this. Because they released a big statement, and it was just very well worded. I think everyone should go look it up and read it if you're interested.
What did they say?
They did a really good job. Just kind of, they apologize. The Republicans are mad that the Boy Scouts took a stance. They're wrong. The Boy Scouts didn't take a stance. And you see a lot of Democrats saying, oh, look, the Boy Scouts had to apologize for Donald Trump. They don't apologize for Donald Trump. They apologized for the fact that it got political in general. They didn't denounce Donald Trump. They didn't say anything about Obama. They didn't get into it. All they said was they invited the president. They're going to continue to invite the president, whoever the president is, Boy Scouts of America.
Right.
It's fun to have the president. It's important for the president to come speak or do something for
whoever
them.
The president
it matters.
is.
And they did a really good job handling that with the statement that they put out. I don't have a blurb here put together. I probably should have done that, but they did a really good job. And to me, it's that's kind of the story here, because I think you can manage these these PR they're challenges, they're PR challenges, and it's kind of like a little puzzle,
right?
Because you need to walk the line between taking a stance and doing nothing.
Right.
And there's not a big gap between those two things these days, or at least there's not a big gap in how those it's perceived.
Not a lot of room to operate.
Right. There's very little room, and they really did a good job with that. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that whole situation?
I think. I mean, there's a lot to say about this. Whether or not we could criticize Trump for what he said, or we could criticize the Boy Scouts for inviting him, or maybe not. I mean, I agree that they should be able to invite the President of the United States and expect a reasonable speech.
Right.
What Stephen Colbert said is that the Boy Scouts, one of the things that's powerful about the Boy Scouts as an institution is that they are, they have this Norman Rockwell, unironic kind of faith that really only comes with youth. Faith in American democracy and American culture and American institutions. These institutions have been, we can talk about the history at another point, but they've certainly been undermined and under fire since at least the Vietnam War. So that Norman Rockwell picture has been in tension, has been, how much of that can we trust the government? Can we believe in these institutions? Can we maintain that kind of unironic belief? I think that one of the things that the Republican Party, up to and including, President Trump, have done very effectively in the culture war, in the division between, what they criticize as, the gay-loving, Muslim accepting, loving, East Coast and West Coast elites, blah, 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 liberals and cheese-eating, Volvo driving, whatever. Cappuccino drinking, is they've said that real America looks like this. It looks like the Norman Rockwell painting. It looks like this unironic acceptance of the president and presidential authority, and anything that doesn't fit that picture, i.e. a black guy, is dangerous. And they've really used this kind of tradition. Never mind the fact that Norman Rockwell himself was a strong New Dealer and, et cetera, et cetera. But they've used this notion of a white picket fence America, 1950s unironic America, as a buttress for their political positions.
Mm-hmm.
That's starting to fall apart.
Right.
We're starting to see that now homosexuals are accepted. People of other religious, non-Christian faiths are, we accept diversity. We have, for example, the police departments criticizing Donald Trump's speech about whether or not police should be more rough with people who are arrested.
That was a standout moment for me.
Yeah.
Him saying that. He basically told...
Well, that was a throwback to the 1950s.
Right.
The thing that was interesting to me is that the chiefs of police they refused to accept it. You also had, for example, the mayor.
They cheered it at the time, which was kind of scary.
Yeah. Well, you also had, for example, when Trump said that transgender individuals are going to be fired from the military, you had the mayor of Austin, Texas. Now, Austin, of course, is a very liberal place, but he said, "Come and join our police force. We would gladly welcome you." And this is, so this notion.
Those two stories go hand in hand.
I think so,
because it's like the society is trying to treat him like a normal president,
right?
But he's not one,
right?
So it causes problems,
right?
And it's the question is, what do you do? Do you continue to go by the rules and you invite the president to do these speeches, and then you just clean up after it and deal with political fallout for your organization afterwards,
right?
Or do you not invite the president and then deal with the political fallout of not inviting one president out of all the other ones? That's the big question that all these people need to figure out for themselves, I guess.
Most broadly, I see these as the birth pains of a new version of America. I don't know what that version of America is going to look like. I think one thing is it is going to be much more diverse. We're going to be a much more accepting of brown people kind of America. We're going to have to be. We don't have any choice.
Trump having these moments.
He's a kind of a throwback. He's the last. He strikes me as, well, I hope he's the last, but he strikes me as kind of a cultural moment where the old order is trying to reimpose itself, or at least it. I don't know if it even realizes. I don't know if people even, the people who are part of this. Some of them do. The Steve Bannons probably do, but I'm not sure that Trump thinks of himself as trying to reimpose a dead order, a sort of a white, plutarchical.
No, he feels like
America.
He's trying to correct the ship. He's trying to get back on course, is how he sees it.
Yeah,
but when in reality, he's trying to turn the ship around.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I mean, there's been so much drift in American culture. And it's been oftentimes under the surface. So you'll see things like, a classic example here is now we have medical marijuana in West Virginia. Who would have thought 5 years ago? I mean, we've talked about this
I didn't think 1 year ago.
Yeah. But these are signs of cultural shift that Trump and Trumpism is trying to undo. And we're seeing the results of the... is the new order going to be able to claim the institutional mantle of an organization like the Boy Scouts? And ultimately, I think they will, but it's going to be a messy process.
What do you think the correct way to handle this? I mean, we're talking about a big picture.
No idea.
We're talking big time.
I really have no idea.
In these small situations, these moment-to-moment decisions people are going to have to make about Trump, I don't have any idea either. I mean, what do you do?
I think one thing that you can do is you can always rely on the decency of the instinctive decency of ordinary Americans. Mm-hmm. That if you know someone, for example, we've seen a lot of peddling of Islamophobia. That has not taken root in West Virginia, in part because these people are not regarded as strangers. They're regarded as our neighbors, my doctor, my radiologist. These are not just, these are, and we think of them as another immigrant, just like, well, in my case, my grandparents, my father's father, came here without papers. But this is, we can count on the kind of institutional Norman Rockwell decency that is the substance of those cultural institutions,
right?
As much as whether or not they invite the president to speak.
All right. Well, let's see. I think that's all we got for today. It's 57. We're getting close here to some rockabilly.
Were we going to talk about something else? Or?
Well, I had the North Korea story, but I mean, only 3 minutes. We don't have time.
I can't solve that one either.
Yeah,
that really bothers me.
Right.
And if there's anything that makes me confident about how to handle that, it's the fact that Trump does trust the generals. He does trust people like Kelly and Mattis, and maybe they know how to handle it.
Yeah, maybe on the next show we can dive into that a little bit deeper. With next week, we're going to hopefully have a really big show. I'm trying to get Amy Goodwin and
I'd love to have Amy.
We're trying to get Amy Goodwin on. We're trying to get maybe if I can get Amy Goodwin and Ted Bettner on, and you, Dan, on the same show. I think that'd be a great show. So hopefully we can put that together for next week. But before we go, I want to go into one thing that we like to call the Trump tweet of the week, a.k.a. the tiny-fingered bully report. So let's go into this here. If Republicans are going to pass great future legislation in the Senate, they must immediately go to a 51-vote majority, not senseless 60. I got news for Donald Trump. That healthcare vote was a majority 50. Vote.
But, yeah, well,
and it didn't work, but okay.
I don't think that Trump really understands the Byrd rule. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. All right, Dan, I want to thank you for coming on here.
Hey,
and,
you bet.
Let's see what we can get together for next week. That'll be fun. This is the Mountain State Update. I'm John Canties. You were just listening to WTSQ 88.1 FM here in Charleston. And we'll be back next week. Let's listen to some rockabilly. Thanks for listening.